Ladies and gentlemen, welcome for the first time, or welcome back to the Electric Vibe podcast. I am Kurt Hoffman, your co host, and the guy to my left is the smooth voiced brother from another mother known as.
I am JD Silva, the Electric Man. How you doing, Kurt?
Good, and just so you all notice, I actually changed Jay's name on there so it said the Electric Man Silva on there because I just thought, why not?
Why not?
So, Jay, we've got a couple of the points of discussion today, and being as this we're filming this on President's Day, where a lot of people have off. I just happen to have off. Our state liquor stores are open. We're the only state entity I think that doesn't have the day off because we're the largest moneymaker in the beloved Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. But I just happen to be off today, and you worked out in your work schedule, your day job, so that
Yep.
we could be together today. And if you notice, I don't have the Electric Vibe background for a specific reason. And today's topic, this kind of leads into where we're going to go today. So, can you tell us what we're talking about today, Jay?
Sure, Kurt. And today's topic has been in the news recently for a variety of reasons, both, I think, positive and unfortunately negative. It's a little bit controversial, particularly in the realm of Prince and the purple community, so to speak.
Yeah.
But today we're mainly going to be talking about the canceled Netflix documentary and all of the associated points and opinions that have gone along with that documentary from its discussion, inception, creation, and ultimate cancellation. And I know a lot of people have a lot of differing and varying and sometimes conflicting opinions. And we're really going to talk about a lot of those things today with some special guests. First of all, we're going to have Hayley Drinkall on, who has been a guest of ours before. Hayley is the obviously the former manager of Cat Glover, knew Prince and interacted with Prince for almost 20 years.
Yep.
Is a creative artist in her own right and really has a lot of insight and information to discuss about the documentary. We're also going to be speaking to Big Coco, who spent years protecting Prince and was in that purple community, in that purple world intimately. We're going to be joined by Harlan Huckey Austin, executive protector for Prince for a number of years, who also can share some insights on his thoughts on Prince and the documentary. And then possibly Damon Dickson, the former dancer of the New Power Generation, will be joining us just also to share some insights and some thoughts. And we're going to be great. We are grateful for all of their participation and time.
Absolutely. And the reason why I have this background ties into that a little bit. So, uh, I wanted to see the Led Zeppelin documentary. That had been in the works for years, and actually made its debut this year to theaters around the country. Like a week or so ago, it was actually on IMAX screens exclusively, and that was, of course, the way to see it and hear it. Unfortunately, didn't work in my schedule to do so, but since it's a music documentary that doesn't focus on all the sensationalistic things that surrounded Zeppelin in their career, such as groupies, trashing hotel rooms, all kinds of sordid tales, I thought that that would be a good talking point into the future of where a Prince documentary could possibly go. And as we all know, well, or may not know, Bernard McMahon, who's the director of this documentary, I'd say I went to see it today. I really enjoyed it. And it focused exclusively on their origins, how they met one another, their childhood. It didn't focus on any of the sensationalistic stuff. Now, you know that there's groupies, you know that there's stuff, but you heard footage and saw footage that has never been seen, pictures from the members' private collection of when they were children and their parents. It was really endearing. The big part of it was the person that, of course, has not been alive since 1980, since he passed, is John Bonham,
Right.
and they've unearthed this interview that I don't think any one of the members had heard, and they played it to them. That the very end. I don't want to give too much away, but he plays a significant part in this whole documentary, and you hear his voice and the sound engineering on this documentary. Of course, they wanted it to sound good and look good. They didn't clean up the visuals like they did, like Peter Jackson did for the Get Back documentary on Apple or Disney Plus rather. and which was amazing how they restored the footage and stuff. They didn't do so much of that for this particular picture, but the sound was incredible. But the interview with John Bond was very telling, and you could hear, you could see the reactions of all of the individual members who were filmed interviewed separately. But it, some people consider this a little more infotainment based. I thought there was a lot that covered the background, and I'm thinking for those who haven't seen this documentary might want to catch it if it streams later or however it's going to, whatever form it's going to take once it's not in theaters anymore. But it's really, this is one where a person like myself who happens to be in a tribute band, not putting a wig on to look like Robert Plant, but trying to do the justice and honor doing the vocals and the harmonica playing. I really wanted to see it on the and hear it on the in the big screen, and I'm wondering if this could be a way, maybe not this same director, but I would love to ask these folks what they thought of who they think would be a good director of this. We know that Ava DuVernay was offered the gig first.
Right. For the Prince documentary.
And
Right.
honestly, I thought a woman, and more specifically a woman of color, to tell the story about Prince, since Prince definitely tapped into his feminine energy in terms of his presentation of himself. People who knew him was like, yeah, he was as masculine as they get, but he kind of had this duality,
Right. Right.
the whole Gemini ethic, I guess, and I'm wondering if it would be a better option to have a woman director tell this story. I almost thought like if you got a woman director or definitely an African American director. I mean, honestly, male or female, like why doesn't Spike Lee do the documentary?
But right. And
Is
Spike
somebody
obviously,
along that way?
yeah, he knew Prince very well. They
Oh
were
yeah.
friends. I think it's going to be very interesting just to go back to what you were talking about the Led
Mm-hmm.
Zeppelin documentary,
Mm-hmm.
because it's interesting to see, how this Prince documentary has evolved from
Yeah.
it being, a piece about his life, about his artistry, his
Mm-hmm.
music, and his genius.
Mm-hmm.
And then it
Right.
kind of took this turn after Ava DuVernay left. It almost became controversial right away. I
Yeah.
mean, DuVernay left, had to find another director,
Yeah.
got Ezra Edelman,
Yeah.
who people will know from the O.J. Simpson
Made in America documentary.
Made in
I
America.
never watched that. That came out in 2016, I believe.
Right, right,
Right.
and
Yeah.
it was wonderful. But it almost seems like the documentary was fraught with a bit of controversy from the get-go. You were
Yeah.
hearing all these rumblings about what the content was going to be. I've heard, and again, we'll talk about this more when our guests get here, but
Yeah.
some of the more salacious details and some
Mm-hmm.
of the more salacious images, which, fair or unfair, are probably unnecessary, some of it.
Yeah.
And obviously, the estate has a vested interest to protect Prince's legacy.
Mm-hmm.
But there's always that balance, right? Of what do you show, what do you not show, what do you talk about, what do you not talk about, and you're never going to make everyone happy, right? And I
Right.
think that's where the controversy started, because what are we going to show? Is it going to be a puff piece? Are you going to
Right.
whitewash all the flaws that Prince had,
Mm-hmm.
or are you going to show it warts and all? But if you're going to show it warts and all, how much is too much?
Right.
And I think that really has been, was like the catalyst, I think, leading up to just the documentary being canceled
How
altogether.
so? Yeah. To piggyback on that, um, so Prince was a guy who carefully curated his mystique. Okay. Um, he would frequently toy with interviewers and give a different answer every time to how he grew up, what his
Right.
parents' background was like, and so we all know those stories. Those of us who have followed Prince and read interviews and what have you know this. And his associates, I'd love to get their take on that as well. So Prince's main thing, and what might be missing in many artists today, because many artists are kind of, their hand is almost really forced in a way to be present on social media. This is something that Prince did not have 40, 50 years ago.
Right.
Okay. Um, now, I mean, and he was almost kind of not really on social media to begin with. If you remember towards the end of his career, he had an Instagram account, but he didn't really put himself out there on social media. He would post on Twitter, he
Sure.
would do things like that, including up to his death, with
Right.
posting. But he didn't. He controlled what people saw more than anything.
Absolutely.
Um, so the question that bears is how much how much of the mystique in somebody who was carefully controlling, how he looked. He was dressed and ready to go at seemingly at all hours of the day, all hours of the night. This is a
Right.
guy who was in control of what people saw of him.
Right.
He did not let his guard down in public. Very at I don't know if we'll say seldom at all, that to
If
my
ever.
knowledge, if
Right.
ever.
Right. Mhm.
So, which for many people, including myself, you know, I kind of still want to see for my own eyes and and judge with my own eyes and ears the documentary. I would almost say that they should have shown this to associates who were there and get their opinion on it. And the estate should have been involved with these associates to say, hey, look, we're the ones who worked with this guy. So when we have our guests come on, Jay, I know our line of questioning is definitely going to bring that up.
Right.
There, because Hucky, I think the last time we talked off the air with Hucky Austin, I'm certainly let him speak for himself, but he did share that he just didn't really, in so many words, did not enjoy the line of questioning. I don't remember he said this when we had him and Coco on. He did not enjoy the line of questioning. He was interviewed by Ezra Edelman,
Right.
and when he was brought in, and he didn't really like the line of questioning was going. So he declined to, participate. And I think Hayley will share similar stories that was shared with her when Kat also did this, because I don't think she shared that when we had Hayley on the last time, but she shared it
Yeah.
off the air. And
Right.
that and long story short, that got the two of us saying, you know what, Jay, with this whole thing, maybe we should ask these guys to come on and talk about that, because they were kind enough to talk about it with us off the air. And if they
Sure.
felt comfortable, could they come on and talk about this now? And they are. So Coco, I don't think we really had that conversational narrative with, but he certainly knows what the subject is,
Right. And of
and
course,
I'll be
within.
interested to hear from them. And we've had other associates on who will remain nameless, but who actually were participants
Mhm.
in the making of the documentary and are not terribly happy that the documentary is not going to come out and see the light of day.
Right.
Um, because
The
Ezra
other-
Edelman spent. Now, a lot of people are like, well, Ezra Edelman was not a fan to begin with. I don't think that really matters to me,
Absolutely. Right.
because somebody, you got to have a. I get the whole thing. You got to have a passion for the subject and whatever. The director for the Led Zeppelin documentary definitely had a passion for Led Zeppelin. Bernard McMahon also did a series, going through my notes here. He did a series called American Epic back in the late 2010s, in 2017 and 18, and it covered a lot of the blues artists of
Mhm.
America, people who would influence Led Zeppelin, to be sure. And some of those folks show up in the Led Zeppelin documentary. He kept the historical time. Bernard McMahon kept footage edited throughout the documentary of events and things that were happening, like the moon landing. Led Zeppelin got their first platinum records and gold records the day that the moon landing happened.
Mhm.
So they kept these different things, historical factoids, in context with what was going on in that artist's life, which I really appreciated. I
Well,
and this guy, what direction are we going to take this in? And Ezra Edelman spent 5 years of his life, day and night, taking weekends and stuff like that, putting this thing together. I don't know him personally. I wasn't interviewed for him. I didn't work for Prince, certainly.
right.
But for some reason, you had a few people who say it's one of the most amazing things they've ever seen. Not the least of which was Amir Questlove Thompson, who said it broke him down. It broke him. He had to
Right.
talk to his
Emotional.
therapist just seeing this thing. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't eat. He couldn't drink. Well, I mean, he really got shook by the whole experience of watching it. So I don't.
But At, Kurt,
So
at some point, though, it almost comes down to, and I'm not pointing a finger, but it
no,
also
no,
comes down to whom do you believe, right? Because, it was, the estate was dissatisfied with, first of all, the length of the documentary. It was contracted
right,
to be a 6 hour
six,
documentary, ended
right,
up being a
yeah,
9 hour documentary.
right, right,
Then it came out to some of the content that they were putting in. Then it came out to some of the things that were being said. Then it came out to how Prince was going to be, presented, in what
yeah,
light he was going to be presented. And I think that's really what started to stir things up.
yeah,
But the key for me is, how do you take the emotion out of it for people who knew Prince, worked with Prince, and were, interacted with him intimately? And I don't mean intimately
yeah,
like that, but I just mean, on a personal nature.
right,
I mean,
right,
obviously, people are going to have their own opinions of him.
right,
There's going to be some raw emotions, I'm sure, based on the line of questioning or old memories that were brought up. So,
mhm,
how do you, quite frankly, make everybody happy? Obviously, you can't. That's not practical, right? But could there have been some happy medium? Could there have been some like balance between the estate, the filmmaker, and the participants? That's not for me to answer, obviously. I think that getting some insight from our guests is going to be key. But it's all of these things that helped fuel what ultimately ended up being the cancellation of a very, very important project.
yeah. So here's my thing, Jay. 5 years, a lot of archival footage and things that people have never seen or heard before, 70 different interviews, right?
Yep.
So now that you've got this canceled documentary, I was thinking about this on the way back from seeing this documentary I saw today, The Becoming Led Zeppelin. I'm thinking out loud to myself, saying, well, okay, so now if they're going to start from, if the estate's going to start from scratch, right? How are they going to be able to get as many people who have already been interviewed for this thing to want to go back and be interviewed for this?
Right.
I mean, couldn't you just have pay Ezra Edelman extra bucks? Because money talks, as we all know. I mean, this is just me being trying to be pragmatic about the whole thing. Have a version that they would be satisfied with, where you take out anything that they thought was too egregious, put it out, because to get to simply quash the whole thing and not have any of these people, it's going to be very difficult to get people to want to talk again, perhaps
But if you do that, you know
people
what
that
you
we want to
do.
hear from. Yeah,
If the estate does that and said, take this out, take that out, and I'm not going to say whitewash, but they water it down to a certain degree.
yeah,
What does that do for Ezra Edelman's creative
career,
integrity?
yeah, I
This is
know.
this is the project that he put together, and basically you're telling the director of the project, well, we'll only put it out if you take out this, that, or the other thing. Personally, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah,
If I'm working on a project like
yeah,
that and I have strong convictions and I believe it, and you're telling me, well,
yeah,
in that case, you don't need me. The estate can put
yeah.
out their own project, and you don't need to hire an outside director.
But this guy
So,
got 5 years. I hope he still got paid for this whole
right,
thing. I
right.
can
I
imagine
hope you
he
still got
didn't.
compensated. Yeah,
That's what I'm trying to say. Is just it's just you've wasted this entire 5 year period. How 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 involved was the estate in being the gatekeepers of this whole thing? It sounds like that they just this guy did his own thing and they let him go, and then all of a sudden, because at the time that he started making the documentary, there's different people in charge. At the time the documentary was announced, Comerica and who else was in charge?
was that before Primary Wave took over?
I think for Primary Wave, but Londell McMillan in either case was a part of it,
Yep,
right? So I would love to talk to Lundell and Charles. Is it Charles Spicer?
yep.
I would love to talk to those guys and say, hey, look, you know, it's going to be. I'd love to hear from them, honestly, and whomever they decide to want to talk to about this,
Right, right.
because we don't want. And one podcaster I'd watched used the word 50 Cent word hagiography,
Hmm.
which is a fancy way of saying rose tinted,
Right.
watered down version.
Yep.
Um, because there, I understand that Prince is now, a financial entity. they don't
Yep.
want to. I'll just put it in. They don't want to f with the money train
Right.
portion
Right.
of Prince. I That's what this all boils down to. They don't want any element of cancel culture, anything that would smack of cancel culture to ruin the financial possibilities of the Prince gravy train, so to speak.
Right.
Now,
Right.
because you see what happened in Michael Jackson's estate.
Yep.
Okay, let's bring that up for a second. When the documentary Finding Neverland came out with all these accusations about Michael and the things that he did to certain young boys, which has never been proven,
Allegedly. Right. Right.
allegedly, right? That has never been proven. Um, so I see the estate probably taking a look at that and saying, we don't want some Finding Neverland shit happening to this documentary. And maybe that whatever version of this that they got to watch probably sent off those kind of red flags. And then this is all going to be speculation and conjecture
Right. Right.
because
Right.
we haven't heard from these folks what they actually saw. So and I honestly, the one person that we know that had a hand in some of the making of the documentary, I'd love to talk to confidentially and say, well, had you seen any of the documentary footage
Mhm.
yourself?
Right.
We don't have that answer, and I'd certainly like to speak to them about that. But
I just can't
I
wait till
just
we
want
get
to
our
know.
yeah. I mean, I can't wait till we get our guests in and get a different insight
Yeah,
and a different take on what happened. And it's going to be, look, it's gonna fuel the dialogue, right? It's going to keep it going. It's an important topic, and I think it's a topic that needs to be discussed.
it certainly does. Okay. Okay. Hucky just sent me an update. He may not be able to make tonight's episode, but we'll have Hucky on as a separate episode. Hey, listen, this is not a topic that's going away anytime soon. We certainly
Exactly.
talk. We we're the content creators here. We want to do a part two of this. We can do a part two, three, four, five, whatever. But we're going to hear from certain associates tonight. He said if he gets done, it's not too late. He'll text me. But more than likely, we're not going to have Hucky on tonight, which is fine.
Right.
We certainly will have him on later on because he has some really exciting things coming on the pipeline. So we're going to hear more from Mr. Austin because he shared with us some exciting news regarding some stuff. But if you haven't followed Hucky, I'll just throw it out there. Hucky's got a great Substack. Substack's a big thing right now. And he's going to have some exciting things to come out on his Substack. And we'll probably just still promote that. And so we're going to wait for our guests to come on here. I'm going to pause this and stay tuned for more.
And everyone, welcome. We sure do appreciate it. Hayley, Damon, Big Coco, it's great to have you here. Thanks very much for taking the time. We sure appreciate it. As you all know, we really wanted to kind of talk about the documentary, the canceled documentary about Prince. And who better to do that and to get some thoughts and opinions than the people that knew Prince, worked with Prince. And obviously, we're sure you have your own opinions about some of the things we're going to discuss and some of what happened during the trajectory of this documentary. So I'd like to start, Hayley, with you. And if
Okay.
you can kind of tell us how you were approached for the documentary and as much as you can, take us through your experience with your interviews and things.
Okay. I think they emailed me at first. It seems like an eon ago, like years ago. I'm like thinking, did they email me first? I think they emailed me first, set up a preliminary phone call, and it all sounded okay. I was like, okay. And you kind of expect, you're going to be dealing with people that know what they're doing, and a professional. And I said to Kat, this potentially could be good, and it kind of started there, really. And I got a phone call, set up a phone call meeting, and listened to what they had to say. Went back to Kat. I said, well, up to now sounds okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't see a problem.
And so then they took you through the process of actually sitting down, you and Kat, for interviews proper, correct?
Well, they talked to me first, then set up a phone call with Kat, which ended up being kind of like an interview situation. And I'm kind of like, you pitch in the documentary, it's not really an interview as such, but it was going that way. And then they set up date for recording, and that was basically it, really. And then, of course, like, they filmed the interview. So
it fascinates me, and Kurt and I were talking about this before you all joined, because obviously you all experienced, worked with, cared for Prince on a personal level. And so you've probably heard these stories, that the documentary was planned, and, Ava DuVernay was doing the first documentary, that got shelved. Then Ezra Edelman came in, and he ended up doing a 9-hour documentary versus the contracted 6-hour documentary. And there was all this, a lot of back and forth. What types of stories were going to be told about Prince? Was it going to be a puff piece? Was it going to be, a lot of salacious and or dirty details? Having worked with him, and Damon, I'll move to you next. Having worked with Prince all those years, how do you feel about some of that?
To be honest with you, man, it's I was just talking about this when they said the documentary was shut down, and now Paisley, the people who are running Paisley or whoever it is has an opportunity to right the wrong or whatever. I don't really know a whole lot about the documentary. I know that I got someone reached out to me some years ago. Like I said, it's been freaking, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago or whatever it was. And they wanted to, have this conversation. We just want to ask you some questions, da, da, da. And I initially told the woman that asked me, I was like, so I don't really have any insights for you. I don't know what you would want me to tell you, and even then it felt like someone wanted to get some, backstory, dirt type thing. Right. And exactly. For me, I could never be, there was nothing that I could give them that would be quote unquote juicy for them to put on some documentary. Because what I'm going to tell you is, first and foremost, he was my friend.
Right.
First and foremost, when we go through talking about somebody who's cool with you, that's like me having a conversation about Kirk or Tony.
Right.
Anybody else in that band. We have a friendship. And yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? Like the security, anybody that worked for him. It's like, you want me to pen some words out there that'll be, carry on somewhere, and people go, oh, I can't believe he said that. And what I told her was, there was nothing I could, say that would, that was surprising. Prince was human like everybody else. He made some mistakes, and he was always very helpful with everybody that was in the band. If you were a part of his family, his band, he had nothing but the best for you.
Right.
So a lot of that, for me, when I heard that it was, some of the people that was supposed to be said things, and I was going, Jesus Christ, are we really putting that out? Is that what we're doing now that this man ain't here? Right. You're bringing up stuff that nobody knew about, and we can't get a credibility for it if the man ain't here to defend himself. And you're saying all these things. So for me, I don't. There was nothing that made me smile when I heard that the strip was shut down. I was like, oh, okay, well, obviously somebody didn't like something, and now they're saying Paisley Park has an opportunity to right the wrong, or so to speak, or whatever. And I'm going, right, what's wrong? Unless you're gonna talk about all the great things that this man have done, if you're not gonna talk about who he is personally, yes. No. Is he a saint? No, he wasn't a saint. Okay? He's human like everybody else. He put on his pants leg the same way we do, one leg at a time. Okay? And I'm gonna go into Damon Dickson's word. He take a shit like everybody else. You gotta sit down and take that motherfucker. Come on, man. Stop that bullshit. So for me, it's like, everybody can come off and say all these things. Like, I had a friendship first and foremost. We've had conversations. I mean, I've got Jehovah's Witness books over here that the man gave me to study. Okay, that's how close we were. You know what I mean? So I can't sit here and bash somebody or say he didn't do anything, or I don't know his personal life, what he did outside of the music, outside what he did with any women. I don't know none of that. I know what I saw when I was around him.
Right.
Okay. perfectionist. The man did his thing. He, if you were in around his camp, he was watching everything you would do to make you better. So I don't really have anything to say about that. That the whole documentary thing is a joke to me. I mean, it really is. I mean, and if somebody's going to do something, talk about who Prince was, the impact of music, the impact he had on certain people's lives. Mm-hmm. Talk about that.
To that point, Damon and Coco, we certainly want to hear from you because I know you said nobody had contacted you about it. I just today went to see a music documentary, knowing that we were going to have this discussion. I went to see the recent Becoming Led Zeppelin documentary, and unlike Prince, the only guy who's no longer with us has been the drummer John Bonham, the legendary drummer, because he passed away in 1980. But the three remaining members of that group, this is a group, this isn't a solo act. So they're still here to tell their story and help to some degree control their narrative. So it's a completely different animal as opposed to what somebody's going to do with Prince and his various bands, because like James Brown and many other folks that he admired, he had different configurations of his bands, much more so I'd say for Prince. Sly and the Family Stone. The Family Stone is pretty much set in stone, so to speak. Pardon the pun. But right. James Brown had Famous Flames, and then had the JBs, and he had different versions going through the decades. But so, what would you want to see, and who would you want to see do the documentary? Because right away I think of somebody like, and speaking of Sly Stone, Amir Questlove Thompson, who's doing the Sly and the Family Stone documentary coming out soon. If I were to pick anybody that would do justice to Prince and his legacy, somebody along those lines maybe, and focus more on the music and all that other stuff. Right. Where do you? I mean, somebody's going to do a documentary. The estate's going to do a documentary. So that's not going to stop, probably.
If somebody's going to do a documentary, it should start with the NPG. Period. Because I truly believe, I may be a little biased, but that was totally the best band he ever had. And then, of course, if you got some Revolution folks, with Sheila, people like that, people who literally spent more time with him than anyone else, is that band. Yeah. Anybody that played for Prince from 85 to 95, you spent more time with Prince than you did your own family. So if anybody's going to do a documentary, it should be a little bit of Revolution and the MPG.
Well, to your point, Coco, if I heard correctly, recently Michael Bland was on an interview, and it is found that he has had more recorded sessions as a musician than anybody else. So if anybody, music-wise, is going to be interviewed, certainly I would like from that band. It should be somebody like him, because and all the guys, of course, but in the NPG.
I mean, if you're going to have somebody, Michael, Sonny, Tommy, all of them guys spent many hours in the studio. Levi, many hours in the studio. Hell, Kirk Johnson, many hours in the studio with this man. Okay, we can go back to all these people. Even Morris Hayes have spent time with him in the studio. You know what I'm saying? And so if you're gonna go to the sources that can tell you real life stuff.
Right.
Who Prince really is when it comes to this music.
Right.
And just how, he can be a shrewd person. You either like what you're doing or you don't like what you're doing.
Right.
Hey.
So having said that, on a personal level, Hayley, can you talk about what type of emotions this brought up for you when they were asking you questions? I mean, when did you know that this might not be what you thought it originally was going to be?
Yeah.
When Kat filmed her segment, and she came back and she was absolutely furious. So, of course, I'm in England, she's in the USA. And I'm like thinking, oh yeah, she'll be done now. She'll be, she come back and she was just absolutely fit. And I'm like, what happened? What the hell went on? And she said, the stuff they were asking me was just kind of like, it's obvious where they were trying to go. Did you ever see Prince do drugs? Did Prince ever screw his own sister? Did all this kind of stuff? And she was just like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah, I remember her telling me that too.
Yeah. So, I mean, she said, interestingly, I said to her before she just did the interview, and I used to say to her before every single thing that we did, if there's anything that you don't like, because you're there more than I am, do not sign. Don't sign it. Mm-hmm. And she said, when she went into the Netflix slot, there was everything set out on her supposed, piece of paper, catering will be provided, this will be there, and, COVID was, at the time, they were using masks and, all that kind of stuff. Sure. And none of that apparently occurred. None of it. There was no catering, apparently. And I've heard a few people say this. They were kept there longer than what they should have been. And she just said, interestingly, I'll tell you this. I said to her about not signing the contract if she didn't like any of it, which we always did that anyway. Interestingly, the director, is it Ezra Eidelman? Is the director? He told her if she doesn't like it, don't sign the contract as well. And that came from him because he interviewed her.
Wow.
He was the one who did our interview. And she knew she wasn't going to sign it anyway. But I thought that was really interesting that he said that to her.
Wow. So there were all those things in between while the process was going on, certain red flags, so to speak, that you just noticed. Wow.
Yeah, there was just little things, but nothing that you would say don't bother turning up for the filming. It was just little things where you think, do they actually know their stuff? Do they know? Yeah. There was kind of little gaps, but you think, well, they're a documentary team and they've done OJ, they've done other stuff, and you just think, well, this is the next documentary for them, But for us, it's personal,
Right.
Yeah.
And then when that interview dropped, and she filmed it, and she come out and she was absolutely furious with what they'd said, how it was conducted, everything. And I've heard that so many times now, as time's progressed. I don't think I've heard one person say, really honestly, that they had a good experience.
Yeah.
This is just them, but hey.
Yeah. If they continue, if the state takes over this documentary, and it's my understanding that over 70 people were interviewed for this over the course of 5 years. So they're going to start this whole thing from scratch. I don't know how well that's going to work, because who's to say that these 70-odd people are going to want to be interviewed again? They already got burned, probably a lot of them.
Yeah.
Some of whom are no longer here, including, Cat Glover.
Yeah.
Is no longer here to represent.
Yeah.
So to start from scratch again, I don't see how successful that's personally that's going to be. I immediately thought about that today when coming out of watching this Led Zeppelin documentaries. How are they going to assemble all these people again? They're not going to want to.
Not going to want to do it, right?
Not going to want to do it because they've already done it. I've already said what I wanted to say. I'm not going to say it to a new person or for the state, maybe. I mean, this is all conjecture and speculation. I understand that, but I don't know. If you were going to be interviewed again, would you want to do it for the estate? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, depends who's doing it.
Right. That I was going to say.
It's kind of like it's trust, and when it comes to the estate, there's a lot of people that haven't gone back. Just they ain't come back. So I don't know. I don't know how it's going to work, but I mean, it's like you say, people have already filmed their stuff and said what they're going to say.
So Hayley, that's interesting because you just mentioned the word trust. And I'm gonna direct this question to Coco. Big Coco, you were obviously charged with protecting Prince. I mean, you were with him, you were taking care of him on a daily basis. I'm not asking you to share any, personal details, but in your profession as a protector, I'm sure that there are things that you saw that are not for other, ears and consumption, things that you have to keep close to yourself. How do you feel about some of these things that start to come up when they start talking about salacious details or, stories like that?
Well, I'll say, believe it or not, I didn't see any of the stuff that these people are talking about. So it all shocks me because I didn't see any of that.
Mm-hmm.
Any of that. I saw a man who loved beautiful women and was a player with a capital P. And then he met one that changed the game.
Mm-hmm.
And she got all the attention. She got all the everything. And anything else are just stories.
Yep.
You know what I mean? My position was kind of right there, along with his brother and Joey and a couple other people. We were right there. If he moved, we moved. So we didn't see all this other stuff about him sneaking away, and then he ain't sneak away from me. He ain't sneak away from Joey. He ain't sneak away from Hucky. He ain't sneak away. Like, what do you mean sneak away?
Exactly. What do you mean? How you sneak away from four big old brothers always around you?
Right. I'm sitting outside your door most of the time. How you sneaking away? Like, literally, he would call me on the phone. I'm right next door, but he would call on the phone and say he's finna go downstairs. Okay, we going downstairs. When did all this stuff happen? It must have happened after 96.
Yeah.
It sure didn't happen in the early 90s.
No.
And that's somebody else's story to tell there.
Exactly. And even then, you don't tell it. Like, you don't say that. You don't say nothing.
Right.
That's not your position to say.
Yeah.
Whatever happened, happened. Yeah. You saw it, okay. Unless it affects someone's child, unless it affects someone's breathing, where you giving people stuff that's going to kill them, then of course you say something and you step in and you do your job as a human.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are hired to do protection, that's not your job to say what happened. Mm-hmm. It's over.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Then if the person passed away, have respect.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Have respect. The person is no longer here to defend your story.
Damon, you actually said that when we had you on our show a few months ago. You kind of touched on the same thing. You were telling some of the funny stories about, discussing Jehovah's Witness and discussing the Bible and things like that. But you also said that, quite frankly, those were your stories to tell.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, like I said, we sit down and had conversations. Now, after I left the band, like I said, he reached out to me, calling from that block number like he always do. So what are you up to? Like, you get this number. So
at 11:45. At
11:45 at night. Like, what are you doing calling me, bro? And we would say, come out and hang out. Want to talk to you about something, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, when you want me to come out? He's like, can you come out here, be out here at so-and-so time? I'm like, all right, I'll be out there. And we were just sitting, it was just, what are you up to in your life? What's going on with you? And it was just personal. It wasn't music. It wasn't about what my career was, had been after I left. It wasn't, what are you up to right now? And then when I told him I was working at a daycare, he looked at me and had this look on his face like, a daycare? I'm like, I like kids,
for the kids?
Yeah.
Dancing for the kids?
I'm like, I'm daycare with kids, man. But, here's a man that snuck and gave money to a lady who I used to go and talk to at a school, mm-hmm. to her to open another school.
Mm-hmm.
But didn't tell me.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So let's talk about them kind of things that he would do.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like him giving money to a program in Louisville, Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
Some kids at a music school.
Right.
Talk about them kind of things.
The school in New York.
Why we gotta bring up like some old negative, she said he did this to her and blah, blah. That's like I saw that documentary with who is it, Sinead O'Connor?
Right. Yep.
When she
Yeah.
started talking about he chased her around the car. Like, Prince? Chased who?
No.
Yeah.
Not you.
Not you. I know he
Not
wasn't
you.
chasing you. You ain't his type.
Right. Not you. Come on now.
Come on.
Stop.
Hayley, when you heard that the documentary was finally canceled and it was just not going to see the light of day, what's the first thing that went through your mind?
Yes, was the first thing I thought of, to be quite honest. I was just like, I'm glad, because, you know, I mean, I wasn't worried about what we filmed because we didn't sign no releases on it, so they couldn't use it. In fact, they had the audacity to ring me about a year after the interview was filmed. And interestingly, they said to me, I was like, I looked at my phone and I was just like, you got to be kidding me. What are they wanting? So I answered it and they said, we could really use that footage because it's really good and Kat's brilliant in it and stuff like that. I said, well, I don't doubt that. Well, what it is we've got a really big gap at the end of the 80s and we haven't got anything to fill it. And I was like, oh, so we're gap fillers then. Oh, great. You know, no way. You know, it's not happening. You know, we really, you know, and I'm like, how can you make a documentary on that scale and have a gap in the 80s when it was like Sound of the Times, Love Sexy? Where's the gap? Right. You know, what's that about? So when I heard that it was finally cancelled, I was just like, good, because you don't need stuff what was rumoured going to be in that, you know? The music, the work he did. I mean, I found it really interesting that not many people kind of like to do all these documentaries, they paint him as being sad, lonely, addict. It's like, get out of here.
Yeah.
None of that stuff. None of it.
Yeah.
They don't talk about how he wasn't like that, complete opposite. And all the charity work, like what Damon's just said, all the stuff that he did, what nobody knows about and they still don't know about. Nobody ever talks about that. They don't talk about it enough. Mm-hmm. You know? Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm glad they've shelved it. I actually hope that it teaches them a lesson in some kind of way going forward, because people who are thinking of hiring people who were involved in this documentary, I wonder what they're going to think. You know, why did it get cancelled? What went on? You know what I mean? You don't need that stuff.
Right.
You know?
Well, and it's like what you said in our intro and what you said before. You know, it's all conjecture. It's speculative. You know, it's based on whomever is saying what. Everybody's got their own story to tell or that they want to tell. But Coco, to your point, should it even be told? Right? I mean,
first of all, we're talking about a 60-plus-year-old international musician. Now, if he has an ache or a pain, he deserves it. Mm-hmm. If he has an ache or a pain and he needs to see a masseuse or he needs to see a doctor, okay. None of us are at that age. None of us been jumping off stages for the past 40 years. Mm-hmm. None of us.
Right.
So, you know what I mean? You got to think about we waking up with aches and pains and we didn't even do all that stuff he was doing.
Right.
Like for real. And he was making us do splits.
Right. You know what I'm saying? Think about it. So if we now in our late 50s and we have an ache or a pain and we find a pill or some kind of shot that's going to make us feel better, we're going to get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Okay. I mean, that's just the bottom line. That don't make you an addict.
No.
If you in pain and you busy and you missed your prescription from your doctor because you in another city, you go to another city and get that prescription. What's the problem?
Which just bears that this was a man. Yes, he had that mystique and he had that aura and he was Prince. But at the end of the day, he was human. He was a man.
It is, David. That's it, Jay. He's a human.
Yeah. Right.
And so I think that to act like, and again, I don't want to talk out of turn because I wasn't there. I wasn't in the inner circle. I'm looking at, reading things and hearing things. But if we're going to have just a basic decency and a respect for someone else, why does it need to turn into sex sells, drug sell? There was a quote.
The question is, who are these people? Like, what position did they have, and how close were they really to him? Like, who are these people?
Yeah, who are these 70-something people?
Right.
I mean, outside of they saying Questlove was a part of it, I think, okay, Questlove. Are we talking, I mean, they're saying, oh, well, all of these people that we talked to, they had personal relationships with him. What kind of personal relationship did they really have with him? Because, like I said, I can tell you times he called me out of the blue to come hang out and just talk about everyday shit.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think there's a section of the population, if I may, that see Prince, and many of us who followed him in his career throughout the decades, he had such a carefully curated aura of mystique that he built around himself. He would say conflicting things in interviews about how he was raised and all that stuff, which generates curiosity. Okay, not saying it's right or wrong. It's just, he was trolling the media long before the term trolling was a thing. Okay. Right. He was the original troll when it comes to the media, when it comes to playing with the media.
Yeah.
And was that because he knew that they were going to try to come at him with the smoke and try to find out all the dirt on him anyhow? I mean,
if there's an entertainer that's out there that don't have somebody trying to pry in and find something negative to put out there on a person.
Sure.
You know what I mean? We all grew up in a household where you have certain things. I mean, I grew up in an abusive household. My father was very abusive. Then people used to tell me, you need to go talk to a counselor because you might be just like him. I don't think so. I don't think so. That's not how that works. That's not how life works. I mean, maybe in some cases, some people may do that, but that's not reality. Yeah. You have a choice in life, and that's what something that Prince used to say to me is, you got a choice of what you want to do with your life. Mm-hmm. But when I left the band, he was like, well, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm just working at a daycare. He said, well, you didn't try to go do comedy? Because he thought I was a jokester.
See, you're funny. You are funny.
And he asked me, said, when you going to do comedy? I'm like, comedy? I said, you going to help me get out there? He said, what do you need my help for? And then we kind of laughed about that and went back and forth. And, it was just what it was, man. It's like everybody, I'll say the movie industry, the music industry, all that stuff, man, people look for the slightest little shit to build onto some dirty stuff that goes on behind it, man. And that's all I see from that stuff. And so, for me, when I heard that the documentary was canceled, I was like, good for it, because shit I was hearing was not cool.
Right. So there was a comment, and I'm going to paraphrase this. Jesse Johnson did an interview last week, I think it was, Kurt, right? And they had asked him about the documentary, and they said that, and again, I'm saying what I read, they said that Morris Day was interviewed for the documentary, and they said that they decided not to use what Morris said because he said too many nice things about Prince.
Too many nice things?
Right.
That's shocking.
Ain't it?
And so
that's shocking. Morris said too many nice things?
And again, I'm paraphrasing. But it's so it almost seems like, okay, so it's not dirty, it's not risque enough, it's not controversial enough. So if that indeed happened, we're just going to keep that off to the side, and that's just a shame because from what I hear, Prince had a great sense of humor.
He could have been a comedian,
right? And so,
right?
But you don't want to focus on that. You want to focus on some other nonsense.
Yeah, exactly. Y'all don't want to talk about the joke stuff that we used to do backstage before we got ready to do the show, water fights and stuff like that. We don't want to talk about that kind of stuff. We don't want to talk about getting like he didn't want you to squirt him with a water gun because mess up his hair because he had to get it done again. You don't want to talk about that kind of stuff.
You want to talk about a jokester that at the very last minute you're doing a nationally televised TV show and you decide to say, "Oh, I'm gonna shoot myself in the head,
Oh,
pretend like I'm dead, and have Coco drag me off the stage and take me and put me in the car because I don't want to talk to David Letterman because they was too corny."
Yeah.
and that was when you what was that for Letterman and Dolphin, right?
Right.
His
Dolphin,
performance of
right.
Dolphin, right?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
You've
Yeah.
said you've told that story on another podcast, but yeah,
Right.
you.
You talk about a jokester.
Totally.
That's just
Totally.
that was
Yeah.
classic.
Joey said to me one time, because I was always, he used to say I was his best kept secret, whatever that means. So I remember walking in one time and he was sat there. I thought, oh, you know, this is going to be great. Usually I'm always dark hair, you know. I had blonde hair this time and I didn't dye it over. And I thought I'd be all right. Little did I know. So I walks in and he sat there, and it's like, to give you context, he's sat on the chair and he twirls round, you know, and puts his knee over and like that, and he looks at me like that, and he just goes, "I've got a hairdresser who can help you with that," you know. I was like, well, you got a wardrobe department and you rolled out like this, you know. And everybody was like, "Oh, okay," and he just went, "She's back," you know.
Wow.
And I'm not saying that there wouldn't be stories like that in the documentary, but for me, and this is personally, I would much rather hear about that, the human side, the joking side, you know, that you all got to see, you know, on a firsthand basis. You know, that's fascinating to me because there's always been this thing, he was dour and he was very down and he was very serious, but then we hear all these other stories about how his personality apparently really was.
I mean, listen, he was a perfectionist, man. When we was rehearsing, if somebody was messing up, he didn't have no problem telling you.
Right.
Yeah, look, I changed the dance step one night, and that brother docked me and told me, "Don't ever do that again."
Yeah.
That's $50.
That was $50.
Yeah.
Just because I changed a dance step, and he sung the line twice and said it was my fault.
Yep. Yep. Because he was waiting for you to do a specific cue to know when to play a certain thing.
Yeah. Do your line, bro. Quit trying to get me in trouble.
But I mean, look at those the stories that we're talking about right now. Okay, you know, and like I said, a lot of times, you know, the good stuff doesn't sell, you know, but in the spirit of the man and the spirit of what he meant, I think, to all of us on varying levels, right? For me, I choose to focus on those types of things. You know, if we're going to put out a documentary, I'm not saying to make the man a saint, but which of us is, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
I'm gonna
you know,
Yeah.
in this day and age of negativity and nonsense, can't we just focus on legacy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Focus on what he
Say
actually
now.
did as opposed to what he supposedly did, you know?
Right. And Coco, to your point, I think there are some things that just don't need to be said sometimes. You know, if there were certain that, like, we don't tell each other everything that we've done. I think we all have great relationships, right? And, you know, warts and all, but you know, I mean, at the end of the day, does anybody really need to know?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
When it came to Prince, he knew how to separate professional from friendship. You know what I mean? Even with his friends, he would keep it professional. Like, all his friends didn't come to Paisley, and if they did, they didn't come to, you know, upstairs where he would sleep at. You stay in the studio or studio area. You know, we will meet you at a studio. We'll go to a studio. We'll go to New York. We know you from New York. We go to New York, and we meet you at a club. And you know what I mean? Like, he knew how to keep everything professional, so that even if something was to go down, it's in the light, so you could see it. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
People talking about he did this and all this stuff, and I'm like, well, when did he do that?
Yeah. Most people didn't just up and pop up at Paisley Park.
No, we wasn't getting in. You had to get past security, then you had to get past the guard shack dude, the dude back in there. He was a trip. And then you had to get into Paisley, and somebody had to let you in. You know, either Dwayne or Gilbert, or somebody had to let you in. And even then, you went and you sat in the front area until they let you back. So it wasn't like you were just getting in, coming in and tripping. It wasn't like that.
No, you better be sitting out in the lobby.
Yeah, I don't know what Paisley Park they got because they don't even look the same actually. But I don't know what Paisley Park they went to.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to say, I'm quite sure there are a lot of people that, have stories, and some of them may be true. And I'm not trying to discount anybody else's story. I just am fascinated by the narrative that things have to be told, other things don't have to be told. And then it just turned into this whole big controversy rather than just let it be a piece about arguably one of the world's greatest entertainers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Eric Clapton, they asked Eric Clapton about how does it feel to be the best guitar player in the world? And Eric Clapton turned around, looked at them and said, you might need to ask Prince.
Mm-hmm. Right. I've heard that story.
So if Eric Clapton is saying that, then he must have been top 3.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, to piggyback on that, Eric Clapton was at a low point in his life, and he was in Canada, I think, on tour. I mean, he had, of course, Eric will be the first to tell you his problem.
Canada for a while.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. His second wife.
Yeah.
And he went to go see Purple Rain by himself at a theater, and said it was like watching that movie. It was like a bolt of lightning to him. He was inspired to write a song, and I want you all to go listen to this later. Maybe we'll put a link, Jay. He co-wrote a song with Stephen Bishop called Holy Mother, and it was because he was inspired by the song Purple Rain. He did a stint. Actually, he did a run of shows at Royal Albert Hall. Hayley, you could probably back me up on this. He did a string of shows at Royal Albert Hall, and he would play Purple Rain, actually.
Yeah. I've heard that before when he went to see Pepper. Yeah, I've heard about that actually.
Yeah. But Eric was very inspired in the early mid '80s by Prince, and he's like so well because guys like Robert Plant, talking about the Led Zeppelin documentary, he says Prince intimidated him. He said he was impressed by him, but he says he took all these all these influences, threw it into a blender, and out came he loved the Love Sexy album. Actually, Robert Plant's one of his favorite albums back in the late '80s was Love Sexy.
Yeah,
he was very interesting by that.
At the O2 shows when we were at the O2 and he was doing the residency at the O2, Jimmy Page was there with Brian May.
Oh shit!
And they were like, we can't do what he does. I think they got quoted on that somewhere along the line as well. But there was like, we can't do what he does. I can, you can play the guitar, but I can't do what Prince does. And that's Jimmy Page.
Right.
Jimmy Page was a top session musician. I mean, he played on Goldfinger for Shirley Bassey. That's him playing guitar. I mean, he played on The Who, The Kinks, The Stones, all their early hits. I mean, he was a top session musician in London, for Christ's sake. Which they cover in this new documentary. I suggest anybody out there go see it. It inspired me to want to talk about this the future of a Prince documentary. And if you were to watch the Led Zeppelin documentary, that's the direction I think they should go in. That they focus on Prince as a child. You're going to talk about some stuff that's difficult to talk about. Had a hard childhood, whatever. Those kind of things are going to be in there because he is a human being. But you don't want to have so much dirt. Everybody's got dirt. Every one of us, like you said, Jay, to your point, every one of us has got shit that they're not proud of. And the focus is on the music, the work ethic, the philanthropy. If you put those 3 pillars as the narrative for the documentary, then I want to watch it. I mean, all the dirt. We'll talk off air. There were some facts that were shared with me by a representative, and I wish I didn't know that information. How sometimes be careful and I didn't wish for it. Really, I didn't wish for it actually.
Right.
But when I found out some circumstances of his death and all that, I was like, oh wow, gosh, I really thanks. for telling me, but no, thank you. I just, because now it's in my head and it's like, I don't want that occupying space I don't want that occupying rent in my head.
Well, and I think that in full disclosure, especially with, interacting with great people like you all and the other, contacts and the friends that Kurt and I have made, there are conversations that we have offline that are things that don't need to be shared and we will never share. Obviously,
no.
there are things that we discuss
Correct.
That are nobody's business, and quite frankly, sometimes they're not our business either.
No.
And so if it comes up as a matter of conversation, but it just seems like what I was seeing a lot in this documentary was that there are some things that were either said or shown, and it was like, well, let's just put this in there because it's risque and it's gonna create controversy and conversation. One of the things that I allegedly heard was they were talking about showing some autopsy photos.
Yeah.
And I says, for goodness sakes, not only is it in poor taste, okay, but it's wholly inappropriate.
Yeah.
And if somebody had that, why would you do that?
How would you get it, and why would you want to show it?
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
How did you get it, and why would you want to show that? Like, are you getting paid to show that?
It's like a TMZ kind of thing, it's like being TMZ.
That's what it is. I mean, it was bad enough when the Carver County files got released, and with no warning that it was, we're going to protect his dignity and what have you, and not everything's going to get released. So I'm thinking, oh well, I know what they took photographs of, so they're not going to get released then. So I was pretty shocked when they were in there.
Yep.
And I was just like. Wow. Okay. So that's what the crime scene photos were. And then they're talking about autopsy photos. To me, that's a completely different thing. They're both bad, but it's like, why does it need to be there? It does not need to be there at all, unless you're going for a certain narrative.
Right. Right. And then is it the director or the creator's supposition that that's what people want to see? And I don't know that that's for anybody else to decide. I mean, he was a man. He had a family. I mean,
exactly. Yeah.
It's just a lot of weirdos out there that want to see stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just it just does not need to be there unless that kind of tells you the direction they wanted to go in.
Exactly.
Right.
So.
Michael Jackson.
Right.
Coco, right on. I when Finding Neverland came out, I said to myself, anybody in the estate that saw that or heard about it or whatever, I'm sure in this 9-hour documentary there was stuff that had red flags like that all over it, and they're just like, no, they're not gonna Finding Neverland prints in this documentary. You know what I mean? That's it. I mean,
Bill Whitfield was Michael Jackson's very last bodyguard.
Right.
And they did a documentary. He actually oversaw another documentary that kind of cleaned up a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. What's it called? I can't remember the name of it.
I personally spoke to Bill, and he said, this is the story of what really happened. Anything else you hear is some made up stuff that they just did, clout chasing, clickbait, all that type of stuff.
Right.
Yep.
Like, this is the real story of what really happened. And I was like, wow.
That's the word and that's the mentality, and the word right there, Coco, is clickbait mentality. That's the word.
Right.
And you've got these younger generations that have been force fed this it used to be 15 minutes of fame back in the day, right? Now it's 15 seconds of fame on TikTok. Right. Andy Warhol said everybody's going to be famous for 15 minutes. We all know that infamous quote. Now it's everybody's going to be famous for 15 seconds, right? Yeah. So everybody, there's this culture of vanity that's inherent in social media, and people just, I don't know, they get force fed all this negative, and get desensitized to that. So let's see the coroner's photos, because you go to see horror movies and all this stuff, and you couple that with social media and the way lot of these folks. I'm not making excuses for it. I'm just saying there are a lot of younger folks out there that are conditioned to this being normal behavior, and you see where the world is right now.
I think the agoraphobes.
Yeah, the agoraphobes, right.
Agoraphobes.
Yeah. Yep.
You know what, Kurt? Here's what I'd like to do before we wrap up.
Yeah.
Because we've had this just what you were just talking about, this culture of almost negativity. Starting with Hayley, can you give us one of your best memories of Prince?
Yeah, apart from that, that was probably the one I would have answered with, to be fair. For some reason, washing machines, it kind of draws back to like what Damon said earlier about, like everyday stuff. That was kind of, he'd ask me like, what do you do? And he's looking at me up and down, and I'm thinking, have I got something going on? And I'm like, and then he just looks and he goes, do people really wash their clothes? And I'm like, well, yeah, washing machines are a thing. Mm-hmm. Well, when I want clothes, I just get them made, I'm like, I can see that about you. Yeah, yeah, I can see that, And he just says stuff like that, and they just look at you, and you just be like, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, he's gone. Oh, okay, great. Yeah, it's like washing machines, washing machines. Yeah,
love it.
Damon, how about you?
Oh man, I have so many things. I mean, I'm gonna just go with us having funk night one night, and me making him laugh as hard as I've ever seen him laugh, and his mascara running down his face when we were in Germany.
Yeah.
And the video's out there, so I'm not lying about it. So
no, wait, is this the one where you put the wig on your head? Okay, right, yeah. Now, where was that? Where was that? Germany?
Trier, Germany.
Oh wow!
And,
Trier.
He called Funk Night that night, and he said, "Hey, Damon, Tony, and Kurt, y'all can't be involved this time because y'all been winning over everybody else." And we're like, "Okay, cool. We'll take a back seat, let everybody else have a chance to win the money." And we got to doing that show, and Tony jumped off the stage, and me and Kurt looked at each other like, "Oh man, he's trying to win the money by himself." I went and got the wardrobe girl to give me a chiffon skirt and a wig. I didn't care what color it was. It happened to be blonde. And I walked out on him, and his facial expression was to die for.
Wow. And Big Coco, how about you? Favorite memory?
There was one time I got a call on like a Sunday, and he said, "I'm going to New York. Hope you're not with nobody, but I want you to go to New York and set up some clubs and set up some stuff for me, and I'll catch up with you." I was like, "Oh, okay." He said, "So go to the airport tomorrow. Your tickets will be there." You know what I mean? So bottom line was everything that he was saying or everything that was being done wasn't being done, as far as rappers and stuff like that. They didn't treat you like that.
Yep.
So for me to get calls like that was it. So he called me and he said, "Yeah, I'm going to New York, and I just want you to go set it up, and I'll meet you down there." All right. So I go to the airport on Monday, first class flight to New York. Okay. Hop on the plane, Continental. Hop on the plane. I get there, get to the front. He's like, "You're gonna be staying at the Ritz-Carlton, East Central Park." Okay. Woo. Okay. Right. All this stuff, I'm like, woo. Right. Ritz-Carlton. Okay. Central Park. Wow. Right. Right. And mind you, I've been to New York a few times, but I've never been to Central Park. So I was like, okay, get ready to go to Central Park. So I get there, get to the front desk. I get 2 envelopes. One envelope has money in it. The other envelope is instructions, what clubs to go to, where you want to be, blah, 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 this and that and this, right? I'm like, oh, okay, this is cool. And so I open up the envelope, and then I call Dwayne, and I say, "What am I supposed to do with this money?" He said, "That's your money." I was like, oh, whew, it was a couple of $1,000. So, oh, Jesus. Okay. He said, hey, so you're going to have a car and he's going to take you there. I said, wait, whoa, whoa. I'm going to have a what? He said, you're going to have a car and a driver and he's going to take you wherever you need to go. He said, I'll meet you there about Wednesday or Thursday. Mind you, this is Monday. So that means I got 2 days in New York with a pocket full of money. Oh my God, who does that? Right? Like, my God, right? Who does that? Right? Okay. So I got this pocket full of money. Then I get a note on my phone in the hotel that says he wants 5 or 6 brand new magazines. And the magazines have to be in plastic and unread because he didn't play reading a magazine if someone else read it. So he wanted these magazines. I have the magazines. I went down there and bought them. And he wasn't lying. I had a driver in the front in a Lincoln ready to take me wherever I wanted to go. I was like, man, can we detour and go to Harlem? Yeah. I was like, okay. So I went down to Harlem, man, 100, such street.
Cool.
And went down there, man, did a little shopping and all that. So, I mean, like this story can go on and on and on, but the bottom line was I spent like almost a week in New York on him.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
You know what I mean? That kind of like, who does that? Like, who treats their bodyguards like that?
Right.
You know what I mean? Nobody even showed up to New York until like Wednesday or Thursday.
That's a great story.
This is coming from a person who's worked for a few people in their time too, Coco, because you work for a lot of artists and currently working for an artist.
That's what I'm saying. And they don't nobody treat you like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like that, like I got a few stories like that. That's why I'm saying, like, dude, you can't tell me nothing bad about Prince.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know who y'all talking about.
Right.
Not the way that dude treated me.
That's great. And this is really, it's been a treat for Kurt and I. And
Absolutely.
we appreciate all of your time. Hayley, Damon, Big Coco. It means a lot to us because it's not an easy subject, with the documentary and some of the things that it's turned into. But you taking the time to share with us your insights is we're just very, very appreciative. Kurt?
Yes, sir. Again, I echo Jay. We never take for granted the three of you individually or together like this, to taking the time to coordinate the schedule like this, to be here at the same time. We really appreciate each and every one of you. And folks, to get more wonderful guests like this, please hit the like and subscribe button. If you are listening onto any of the streaming formats that we're currently on right now, please hit that like button to get future content. And as I always like to say, a rising tide lifts all boats. Jay?
And Hayley, Damon, Big Coco, once again, thanks very much. We're going to stay in touch. We know we'll be seeing you again. For everyone else out there, like we always say, when the universe comes knocking, you need to answer that door. Peace.
Peace.
Yeah.